Right. Every place with any substance or any ambition, of course, is looking to its future. And they're sort of trying to blend nature into the city and all sorts of things, which require a lot of reshifting about how we think about things. So the creative bureaucracy, why, what, and how? Now, it came because about 35 years ago, I developed this idea of the creative city, and we think of creative arts, creative business, creative social innovations, creative academia, and stuff like that. And then, if you look at a place or a city as an ecosystem, of course, there is always a public administration somewhere. Now, if this ecosystem is going to work, and the essence of the creative city idea is quite simple, in a world of dramatic change, how do you create the conditions for people, organizations, and cities as a whole to think, plan, and act with imagination to create opportunities and solve problems? So therefore, the public administration is embedded in all of that. Now, creative bureaucracy. Creative all sounds very interesting. Bureaucracy all sounds very dull. Now, I think there's a power in the oxymoron. But the point about it is actually to try and bring a bit of colour to the whole debate. And what we're trying to do is to say to the 600 million public servants around the world, nurses, teachers, lots and lots and lots of people, look, you are not all stupid. You have a lot of ideas. Sometimes you're trapped in systems. So if you say, and psychologically say, you are part of the solution, then I think you're harnessing somehow their empathy, their imagination, and lots of other things, and you're in a sense empowering them and so on. And this relates to a point that was made earlier by Martin, which is the discretionary effort. If you have an organization that is a bit too tight, a bit unpleasant and all of that, someone, you ask them at 5 to 5, will you help me? They say, oh, sorry, I've just got to go and do something else. See you later, guys. If it's a warm organization, which is sympathetic, empathetic, and so on, the person will say, yeah, I'll help you forever. Not quite forever. And so therefore, harnessing this discretionary effort is really key. So what I'm trying to do, or we were trying to do with this idea, is what I invented a silly phrase, which is called civic creativity. And civic creativity is a form of creativity that is for the public interest in some way, the common good, but it has some of the entrepreneurial spirit and so on that you associate with other sectors. So it's combining the different values, the good of the NGO sector, the public, private, and all of that together in some sort of new format. And of course that requires a shift in mindset. Now, if I was to say we've got one slogan, because slogans are occasionally quite useful, it's basically moving from a no because culture to a yes if culture. So someone comes up, whoever you are, Huda comes up and say, can I do that? And you say, yes, if, rather than no, because we've tried and tested and it doesn't work, and so on. So I know that's very simplistic, but I think it's sometimes helpful. Now, why did we call the Creative Bureaucracy event I do the Creative Bureaucracy Festival rather than conference and so on? Well, firstly, it's about the spirit. What's the spirit? Is it feeling relaxed? Is it feeling informal? Is the atmosphere okay? And the places we hold it in, this is all in Berlin, and you can imagine what Berlin's like, it's actually a bit shabby chic and so on, because we're trying to make people feel, okay, it's all right, I can connect with people, I don't need to worry, and so on, and be too formal. We're trying to create a breath of fresh air, because, of course, zero bureaucracy, the movement that's happening here, and what we're doing, we're sort of friends together. But this is just one of the 6 stages, so you can see it's all a bit sort of higgledy-piggledy put together, but quite a lot of people come. I mean, 1,800 people came last June from many, many countries and so on. And so what we're trying to do there is create a platform for, let's call them innovative change makers. These are people from about 40 countries, 45 I think last year. Obviously a lot of Germans because it's in Germany and Berlin, but there's a really nice mix. Now, we all know the context and urgency. Nobody needs to rediscuss that, the dramatic changes that we see, and that everybody needs to sort of be a bit alert, wake up. In many cases, it's a bit like 1 minute towards midnight in some problems. And so the central issue always, and one of the central issues, is what happened to the old bureaucracy? It got stuck in an old-fashioned system. It's lost its trust. All the things that have been said, it got overcomplicated. And it's the challenge, easy to say, difficult to do, of agility and flexibility and responsiveness. And the criticisms we know, slow, rigid, controlling, you can't hire the interesting people, there's not enough shifting between the public and the private sector, moving around, finding different experiences, so that you yourself as an individual become, let's say, a broader, more insightful person operating on the dramatic problems that we all face. And we know the other point is that it can work in a bubble, be its own self-referential world. You know all of that. Now, the main point, though, about creative bureaucracy is we're trying to say, you are part of the solution. We're trying to be positive about bureaucracy. And of course, the final point is that it has these opaque processes. I remember seeing this artwork in Venice, and I thought it just emphasizes the opacity of something that you don't really know what's going on. We know about the red tape problem. Pick up this lovely booklet there. And also, you know, the bubble problem, which we see all the time. And one of the interesting things is just Paris, the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Environment, and there's often a bit too much paper, which is completely overwhelming. So that has already been discussed. But the key point is that the employee themselves is frustrated, because what we're saying is they know. They know what's going on. They know so often the answers. Obviously, there are occasional people who are just sort of pen pushers and so on. So it's trying to look at that massive employment base and saying, you're interesting, you're good, you've got something to say. Because I asked myself, and I've worked with these bureaucracies for 40 years, although I did once work at the World Bank, that was something else. My first job in my life was the EU in Brussels, another very interesting experience. I won't tell you about that. But what I did discover, that you see and find so many interesting people who've made a choice to work in the public domain. They want to give something back to their city, their state, their region, and so on. And that's the thing that we want to harness. And those structures that they live in so often deflate even then themselves, although they often know the answer. And that's when they hit that brick wall, which we've been talking about before, and which Zero Bureaucracy as a program has really sort of jumped over and broken down. Now, I'm not saying the bureaucracy is everything, but without some sort of regulatory and incentive structure, nothing much can work. So therefore, it's really important to address this. And so we all know what the origins of bureaucracy were: order, clarity, predictability, fairness, justice, these sort of things. And it was once, let's just remember that the bureaucracy was once seen as benign and modern. It was seen as a modern thing when it was invented in China 2,000 years ago. So what it really is, in terms of its best qualities, it's the framework to balance interests, I think. It can be a convening power. It can, obviously, it hopefully focuses on the common good and tries to provide equity and balance between all these interests. And so that question of convening is really an important issue. Now, one of the things, of course, this is just an example, we set these stages so they look a bit bureaucratic at our festival. And then I suddenly, hey, here are some guys, some of them are in the audience, they were here, and we indeed discussed, is zero bureaucracy possible? And it was very interesting because some of our German friends were a bit shocked. I don't know why, but they were shocked. Können wir das haben? Can we have that? And so on. But anyway, it was successful, and I was so delighted that our colleagues from the UAE were here. But what it's basically about in terms of the idea, it's a clarion call to think afresh. It's about unleashing talent that already exists, but also attracting new talent. And this is a major problem, at least in Europe, that the interesting people that exist everywhere in the world, you can't get them to work in a public administration if the image and the way it operates doesn't reflect the way they live their own lives. So what we're trying to do is recapture this notion of bureaucracy as an okay thing, provided it shifts its whole perspective and becomes, let's call it, a different paradigm. So what it's about is, again, as this image shows, what are you bringing? And what we've tried to do is see, for the younger people especially, that there is a vocation in this field that is an okay one, shift the image of what a bureaucracy could be. So in the UAE, with everything we've heard, that sounds like an okay place to work, and attract particularly the young to reshape it, because you've got this disjunction between how they live their life in a social media-drenched world, and the reality of an entity that they go to. And this, as we've done a lot of research about this, is what really messes people up, that they can't really be their true selves. And so, of course, what it's about is, the next generation. We always say that, the next generation. But that next generation is already here. So what we're trying to then say, and we have these cards we give people that they can say, I am a creative bureaucrat, with pride, and then obviously show what they've done and how they've done it. So what we're talking about is reshifting regulations for the 21st century and incentives, reshaping the inner life particularly. That's a key thing for us. What does that inner life feel like in these systems? Is the design okay? Do the corridors look okay? Does everything look like a wonderful environment that encourages connection and so on? And of course create trust and links to all the other sectors in a very natural way, so one doesn't say the exception is to communicate with an NGO or a private entity to do a project together. So it is about, this is an interesting artwork, which is, again was in Venice, which is about rethinking those incentives and regulations. And of course, linking with everything we've said, AI and the digital and stuff like that, and harmonizing that so it works best for everyone. So what we're really talking about, if again, a bit of a longer slogan here, how do you move from a predict and provide model to elastic planning, which is basically about being strategically principled and tactically flexible. And what that means is we know our main objectives, our main aims for the UAE or whichever country, but how we get there, we can't do it in this rigid way. We have to be responsive, move, be agile, and so on. So we've had lots of projects, and the sort of things we encourage is, we've seen in our event, new roles, new departments, new institutions, new programs, and so on. I won't say too much about that, but that's what we're highlighting. And, for example, one of the prize winners was the person from Wales, is the new Future Generations Commissioner. So easy to do. Every policy, every project is seen through the eyes of the next generation. The civic imagination offices that exist in various places. It started in Torino, in Romania, other countries as well, and so on. The Netherlands has a chief exploration officer in the Ministry of Interiors, which looks at all around and explores, is legitimated to do that. The super block, which is a different way of planning, which you can see in Barcelona, and legislative theatre, so that you use theatre to rehearse what a programme could be. We had an example in Manchester where homeless people were acting out being homeless, and then that homeless person actually became part of the local authority to help them change the local authority themselves. So the year goes off with a digital kickoff day where we have about 250 proposals. Then we have a digital day where there are prize winners and all of that. Then we have a government innovators forum the day before the festival, and then the festival itself, which is on the 5th of June this year. So I've said the figures already. The main interesting point is two here. Over 50% of the people who come are under 35. More women than men come. And on the how many have we got? 248 speakers. There's roughly exactly the same amount of men and women talking. So that gender balance, which we obviously work very hard at, I think we've achieved. And that's that. You don't need many facts. And the topics are very much like the topics here. They've changed over time. Initially, it was all about digitization, AI. Now we're really talking about how do you deliver it? How do you make it happen? So that's our really main priority at the moment. The impact and feedback, in broad terms, it's been good. I think it's good. I'll leave you two little sentences in terms of impact. One person said, this is like collective psychotherapy being here. So that was one person. Another person said, I just feel I'm not alone. We're not alone because I've got all these other people, these bureaucrats from around the world who've got the same issues, who are trying to solve them in different ways. What can we do better? A lot of things. Of course, we can always do things better. One particular thing I would say, finally, is we probably should have much more representation from the African countries. We've got African people coming, and we've given prizes to the South African government and Sierra Leone as well. But we could do much more there and have more people from the Middle Eastern countries. So I think it's a movement in the making. All of this, zero bureaucracy, our thing. We're brothers and sisters in arms. And that's all I can say to you. Thank you very much.